What's up, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, women and children of all ages? No, but seriously, what's going on, guys? So it's quote unquote streamer season here in Pennsylvania, New York, Northeast, pretty much anywhere here in the North where we actually see seasons other than wet and dry season that they have in the South and whatnot or whatever. Um, but it's streamer season, and I'm no expert on streamer fishing. However, I have been big into it now for about probably almost a year now, and there's just some common things that I've seen personally that people do make mistakes on. And one of them became super apparent to me this past weekend fishing with my buddy Dan. Not that Dan is a bad fisherman at all. He's one of the best fishermen I know, if not the best fisherman I know. But he kept getting on my case. I kept covering these smaller water types. We were specifically throwing streamers for big browns. And he kept getting on my case. I was covering some water. He's like, dude, that's not worth your time. That's not worth your time. Don't fish that. In some cases, and in many cases, he was right. It wasn't worth my time in the end because there wasn't a fish there. However, we did have this one circumstance where we're coming around a bend, and he goes, hey, that hole up there, it looks good, but it's not. I threw like a half-hearted cast in there because I wasn't just going to walk by it. Always put a cast in. I threw a half-hearted cast, wasn't really paying attention. Sure enough, 22-inch brown comes up, hits my streamer, and I'm not paying attention. I like half strip set, half trout set on it, and of course I missed the fish. We tried to rest it and try it again, but they're not dumb. They don't get that big being dumb, and he was gone. So the big thing I want to get across is that 20 inches is not as big as you think it is. Now, I'm not sitting here and discouraging if you catch a 20-inch fish. Like I'm not saying that's a small fish. That's a great fish. Usually when we are hunting for big fish, we're looking for the 20-inch mark. But 18s and 19s, those are big fish too, and I'm definitely never disappointed about that. I'm definitely never disappointed about any fish. But when we're talking about monster fish, obviously monster is, you're looking plus 25. My biggest brown ever is 23 inches, so 20 is a big fish for me. Anything over 20, I think 20, big fish. That's what I'm looking for when I'm out specifically looking for big fish, is a fish of that size. And the biggest thing I don't think people understand is how small 20 inches is. It does not take a whole lot of structure, of debris, of rock, or of bedrock, of whatever to hide a 20-inch fish, even a 23-inch fish. It doesn't take that much stuff to cover that up. And so what I mean by that is that there's this common misconception that there's this streamer water, right? Streamer water is this big, deep, kind of slow pool, and it just, obviously because it's so big, it holds a big fish. And I've found that that's not the case. Now, I'm not naive. I am a biologist, and I've put electricity in some of these big holes, and I've really gotten to see what's in some of them. And there is oftentimes, and by often, I'm saying maybe 60-some% of the time, or less, 50 to 60% of the time, there's a big fish in those big deep holes, especially in some of these smaller waters that we do shock, where there really isn't a lot of habitat for bigger fish, where you're only really going to find them in those big habitat types. But when you do kind of have like a lot of big fish in an area, those big streamer holes is not necessarily where those fish are. And personally, I have never caught a big brown out of a big, deep, slow pool. I would say that I have caught probably in this past year 4 or 5 big brown trout over the 20-inch mark. Every single one has come out of a spot barely big enough for its body. The first one I caught was while I was nymphing, and there's this big tree down. I mean, a big, big tree down in the water. I could probably show a picture of that. And down below it, on the literally the other side of the rock, between this rock and the bank, where there was only enough space for his body. And then I also, a week later, caught my biggest brown ever. There was these gorgeous, gorgeous deep holes. It looked, the whole river looked big fish. It just screamed big fish. We had a few hits, didn't get anything. I was actually getting high-holed the whole day by another fisherman. I was getting high-holed. He was fishing the best water. And when you're streamer fishing, that's a big deal. When you're the first person through a hole, usually you're the one that's going to get the take. But he passed over some water that wasn't ideal. And whether that was purposeful or not, he passed over this small little tree hole where there was just this short, shallow rift and then an overhanging tree. And right underneath that overhanging tree was a 23-inch brown. And he ate my sculpin while I wasn't paying attention. And I was very fortunate to land that fish. But I want to roll some clips here to show you some more examples. So what you're seeing is a little side channel. And in this side channel, it comes around the other side of this island, as you can't see. It's very shallow on both sides. This is a shallow run. There's not a lot of current. There's a little float here towards the head. But for the most part, you're looking at a very shallow run. But if you look along the left side of the screen, where these bushes are overhanging, a bush protrudes here and it protrudes here. And this is actually one of the spots where I caught one of the browns. I'll show that brown. So there was nothing down here at the bottom when I fished it. But then I moved through the top, and you kind of got this little overhang. Now it's not much. It only sticks out probably 8 inches from the bank. But it's pretty thick. It's like it's not quite. There's not a lot of leaves on this. I couldn't tell you what it was, to be honest. The bush. But it overhangs and it provides some structure. And this is a small side channel. This is not one of your big deep holes. So I tossed my sculpin at the head of this debris, and I started jigging my fly upstream. And once you know it, this big old brown rushes out, T-bones my fly. I set the hook. He runs downstream. Boom. 20-inch brown in my net. And then, so obviously I'm pumped about that. Plus there's, this same creek has these big, deep holes. I didn't catch any fish out of there. Now that doesn't mean that they're not there. Like, I understand I'm not the greatest fisherman in the world, but I'm not half bad either. I found one in that little shallow pocket, and nothing in the big, deep holes that day. Other than some small fish. Oftentimes with the big holes, you do find a lot of fish, but they're smaller. And when you're looking for big trophy-sized fish while streamer fishing, I'm trying to give a couple extra tips to maybe put an extra few in the net. Now, this is not going to work every time, of course, but for a decent amount of time, this could be an effective way to get you guys on some of them big boys. So here's another spot. So out of here, I caught probably a 17 or 18-inch brown. And what's cool about this spot is, this is kind of the same thing as before. Now, the stream's a little wider here. There's no side channel. But this spot is actually upstream of a really deep hole, and probably one of the deepest in this stream section. One of those waters where you would think that there'd be a big brown. And, this is a small wild stream, so 17, 18 inches, you're looking at one of the biggest fish in the creek at that point. So the water picks up here. There's a riffle all throughout. It's shallow here, kind of where I'm standing with the camera. And then there's a little foam line here, and it deepens out underneath the bush. So again, I throw the cast up here at the top, swing it underneath, and there's overhanging some sticks here, and a slot just deep enough for a big fish. There's only one fish in there, just big enough for him. Jerk it upstream, boom, fish on. Nice 18-inch brownie, beautiful wild brown. But again, not your big, deep streamer hole. It's just a small little spot. Now here's another spot. Now this is a big creek. You see some big boulders, and in your mind, yeah, big fish habitat. And obviously I kind of had an idea there was some big fish in there. But the run I'm fishing it's pretty shallow. I'm not gonna lie. There's some other holes in this stream that are literally probably 20 feet deep, where they're just big plunge over these big, giant, mammoth-sized boulders where you could probably fit a couple Volkswagen buses in there, and they'd be fully submerged. This is not one of those spots. This is kind of a, it runs through these rocks. It's pretty shallow up above where I am. You can see it's less than knee-high deep where I am. And then it's shallow here through the head again, and you can see it's basically this depth all the way throughout. But if you notice, there's this one big boulder right here on the side, and obviously that provides some pretty big structure. That's like the size of a freaking car, that rock. But it only leaves a little slot for a big fish. There's not a lot of space there. So I bombed a cast across here, and once you know it, 23-inch rainbow comes out, and just mammoths my fly. I missed it. He was really aggressive. I don't know what was going on, but he hit it a couple more times after that, and finally I was able to get the hook in him. But just again to show you that this is not a super deep spot, yet there's this big rainbow there. Yes, this is another. This is a big water type, it's something maybe you might think a little bit more than these other spots. But this is not like a deep section of that big water. So when you're covering these streams, don't ever pass the big water and fish just these small spots. I would never tell you to do that. Even I know that there's big fish in those spots. Now, not all the time, but sometimes. I just think that these are sections of water that need to be added into your repertoire when you're streamer fishing. I think it could, one, increase your opportunity, because in some of these spots, I think your probability now, my big issue with streamer fishing is I could be so much more successful than I am, but I absolutely suck at setting the hook. These spots, these smaller spots, in my opinion, increase your hook set percentage. And my rationale for that is, when you throw it into a small riff, an undercut, they instantly have to decide to leave that habitat and go after your fly. That usually means you're getting a harder hit, you're getting a more sure hit, which means you're going to get a better hookup. When you're swimming a fly through a deep, big hole, that fish has all day to look at that streamer. If you don't kick it properly, if it's not diving the way it wants it, it's got a lot to think about. And usually in those deep holes, there's probably some other bait fish in there with it. So it has other food opportunities, if not even a smaller fish, smaller trout it can eat. So, in my mind, these smaller spots are especially good for beginners, kind of like myself. I'm no expert, 8 months is not a lot, 8 months to a year is not a lot doing this. This is the perfect spot for beginners to catch a big fish. Now, it's not going to work all the time. That's streamer fishing. You're going to hike miles and miles and miles and miles and not catch jack. I did it all this last weekend for 2 hits from big browns. That was it. So, just some food for thought. You could say, you're crazy Tyler, whatever, screw you, and whatever, and just fish those big deep spots. But if you truly want to catch a big fish, I think there's something to be said for these smaller spots. I definitely think you should add them into the water that you're covering when you're streamer fishing, when you're looking for those big fish. Even if you're nymphing, if you're throwing your hoppers or whatever, throw a cast. It's one cast. It's usually only going to take one cast. So just drop one in there, see what happens, and tight lines, everybody. I hope you guys catch some big ones. If you do, and it's because of this, tag me and leave me a comment. I'd love to see it. Love to see other people's success and whatnot. But until next time, I'm actually hoping to get out tomorrow night. I'll leave that out there. But until next time, catch you later, and remember, fish are friends.